cybersecurity. So
Sorry, I'm setting that up.
that's okay. Level Blue is a joint venture between AT&T and Wilgem Ventures. And what we are is a strategic extension of your team. We offer cybersecurity consulting to help you protect your business intelligence. We offer managed security services to help you predict your cybersecurity investments. And we have our Level Blue labs to help you foster innovation and reduce risk. So Level Blue is cybersecurity simplified. And we just announced Level Blue back in May at the RSA conference. So,
Sorry, I'm just getting everything together.
okay,
I'll leave that up so in case somebody asks any questions, you can see that.
okay.
And then unfortunately, we'll eat up part of your screen, but
Let's see, this isn't working now.
sorry.
No, it's not working. So when you have the chat up, sometimes it,
It went back to sleep. Maybe that's. Last time I did this.
sometimes when you have the chat up, it,
Yeah, I think that's the problem.
It
I
overrides
changed
it.
the focus. There we go.
Okay.
Back to it.
all right, great. Okay, thank you, Kyle. So what we're going to talk about today is the 2024 Level Blue Futures Report, Cyber Resilience. And why is this research so important? If you listen to this presentation today, you'll hear a lot of stats. Some of them you're going to say, you know what, I've been thinking that for a long time, but now you have stats to back it up. You can take it back to your organizations and start a conversation cross-functionally, as well as with your senior leadership leaders about why cybersecurity and cyber resilience are so important and why cybersecurity funding should really be aligned with business goals. So just a little bit about this research. We conducted this in March of 2024, so just about 4 months ago. We went out to 1,050 cybersecurity professionals, leaders, so C-suite, C-suite -1, and asked them about cyber resilience, cybersecurity, funding, attack concerns, how they're implementing artificial intelligence, what they think about their supply chain. And that was done across 18 different countries, and we surveyed 7 different industries. So 7 different vertical markets: healthcare, retail, finance, transportation, energy and utilities, US SLED, and manufacturing. So this is the 2024 Futures Report. And just, you've heard me say cyber resilience a couple of times. Kyle talked about cyber resilience. So just a quick alignment on how we use these terms for the purposes of this research, as well as for the purposes of this presentation. So if you think about cyber resilience is about your entire IT estate, that visibility that you may or may not have inside of your entire IT estate. What it also takes a look at is how well the organization across the board, the entire organization, how well that organization copes with either a cybersecurity incident taking down the entire IT estate, a natural disaster, a hurricane, a flood, a fire, an earthquake taking down the entire IT estate, or some type of man-made event taking down the entire IT estate. So how well that organization copes, how all of those stakeholders in the organization come together. And then we think about cybersecurity resilience. This is what we all work on day in, day out. Cybersecurity, making sure that what we're putting onto the network is protected, making sure our application security is there, making sure that what we're doing beyond the perimeter is secure. And then dynamic computing, we use this to describe computing in general, but more specifically, computing that goes beyond the 4 walls of your organization. So think IoT edge types of computing. A couple of really interesting examples: remote patient monitoring. You go, you have surgery, you come home after surgery. The physician may give you a watch that monitors your vitals, your blood pressure, your heart rate, your oxygen level, and so on. And they're getting that constant information back and forth. Another popular sort of use case for dynamic computing, manufacturing, a manufacturing line that is seen overhead by a series of cameras and sensors to watch what is being made. When a defect is inserted, the line can be stopped immediately and that defect remediated, which means there are fewer recalls once the product goes to production. Robots. Think about robots on a manufacturing floor or even in a hospital situation. A robot can deliver supplies to a nurse's station. A robot can disinfect a room after a patient leaves the room. So these are all those types of dynamic use cases, the dynamic computing use cases. So Another interesting example, cyber resilience, cybersecurity resilience. Think about sensors along a river. When the water rises too high, it trips the sensors and the sensors automatically start to say, okay, emergency medical teams come into play, emergency response teams come into play, your supply chain kicks off, a whole host of apps kick off. Now, what if a hurricane came through and took out those sensors? How would that organization responsible for those sensors along the riverbank, how would they respond? That is cyber resilience. And what we did with this research is we said, we're going to take a look at cyber resilience, how cybersecurity is living inside the organization today. And here's a spoiler on cybersecurity inside the organization today. We're still siloed, we're still underfunded, and we're still not seen as a whole organization issue. And then we took a look at attacks, what type of attacks people are concerned about, and also business agility. So one of the key findings, and this is an important piece of data to remember, 74% of our respondents said that computing innovation outweighs the corresponding increase in cybersecurity risk. So what they're saying is, we're willing to take on risk because we can innovate. So think about those examples I just gave. Remote patient monitoring with a wearable post-surgery, the idea of robots on a manufacturing floor, the idea of robots disinfecting an exam room, all of those endpoints in a healthcare situation, inside of a hospital or a doctor's office or a surgery center. So 73% of people are saying innovation, yes. 27% are saying no innovation because we can't contain the risk. So innovation is outweighing risk. So what are some of the common barriers to cyber resilience? We asked our 1,050 survey participants from around the world what they thought the critical barriers were to cyber resilience. And we can see here, top concerns, 75% say there are new regulations that require unattainable information. There are new regulations coming out constantly, and in many cases, an organization just doesn't know how to get that organization in an efficient way. So there are a lot of manual processes going on to get the information that new regulations need. This is an interesting one. Cyber resilience is a cybersecurity priority and not a whole organization priority. So they're saying cyber resilience only belongs to cybersecurity. So on July 19th, when all those systems went down, it was only the cybersecurity team that was responsible. It wasn't the dev team. It wasn't the ops team. It wasn't the networking team. It wasn't the whole organization. That's what they're saying. So oftentimes cybersecurity and cyber resilience are conflated. The biggest one here is that governance, 72% of governance organizations, the people inside of your company who are making the rules of engagement, say, we don't understand cyber resilience. We're not sure what cyber resilience is. And then further on down, our organization won't fund cyber resilience because they think of it as cybersecurity. And then there's a lack of clarity over where the responsibility for cyber resilience lies. And then executive leadership doesn't prioritize cyber resilience. Now, this is an interesting one to me, that executive leadership is not prioritizing cyber resilience. And what this says is that they don't understand the entirety of the IT estate. And the fact that so many of our CISOs still report into either the CIO or the CTO compounds this problem. So executive leadership doesn't prioritize cyber resilience because the CISO is not there with that proverbial seat at the table, with the CTO, with the CIO, with the CEO, with the CFO, and so on. But 72% of governance teams don't understand what cyber resilience is. But what they told us is this concept of dynamic computing, the idea of innovation, is definitely something they want to explore. 86% of our survey participants said that dynamic computing improves revenues or operational performance. So they're saying they get more performance. They can make more money for the bottom line if they're allowed to innovate, if they're allowed to do things like use IoT types of devices. Think of a garage with the parking sensors. When you pull into a spot, it turns red. So the next person coming behind you can see that, oh, this parking spot isn't available, rather than drive through the rows. That's a very simple sort of dynamic computing capability that organizations are saying, we want that because what it's doing is it's improving our revenues and our operational performance. But what they also told us is they said that dynamic computing, 85% of them said it puts us at risk. But remember, 73% said the innovation outweighs the risk. So 85% are saying, yes, there's risk, but 73% are saying, we don't really care about the risk. We'd rather have the innovation. And so this is what we see inside of organizations today, that there's a lot of uncertainty. 79% of organizations say they have to accept some uncertainty when it comes to cyber threats. So they're saying if something happens, we're just not sure what we can do. We kind of know a little bit, but we don't know a whole lot. 80% are saying that everything inside of that IT estate is so unwieldy and so complex that they have to make trade-offs on the controls that they implement. What we know from our research in 2023 is that the more type of dynamic or edge computing or IoT computing applications you have, the more cybersecurity controls you're going to implement. Because right now, some people will say we're going to bypass certain controls. But once you go outside the four walls of your organization, more controls become important. And 77% of our participants say it's impossible to assess how an attack might impact my business. So everything that happened a couple of weeks ago, 77% of them are saying, we don't know what's going to happen when we have an attack. So what can you do? Go back to your organization, take this research back, start to have the conversations with your leaders about what cyber resilience is. Speak cross-functionally about what cyber resilience is. If you're not sure, bring in a third party to help. Bring in a consulting organization to help you understand how you can become more cyber resilient. Now, if we take a look at cybersecurity resilience, this is cybersecurity. This is what we all work in, day out. And as I said, spoiler alert, we're still underfunded. We still live in silos. We're still not seen as a business priority, and we're often overlooked because it's the last line of defense. We're often not included in architecture conversations. We're not included oftentimes in strategy and planning conversations. And you may have thought that, and it may have been a feeling, and people may have said, oh, you know, you're just paranoid, or no, we're really concerned about cybersecurity. Look, cybersecurity is a board level issue. But here we have the data to back it up. 68% of our survey participants say that there's limited budget for cybersecurity. 66% say cybersecurity is an afterthought. So when you thought that the organization wasn't taking cybersecurity seriously, 66% are saying, yes, cybersecurity is an afterthought. And 64% say cybersecurity is siloed. So all of the work we've done between DevOps and DevSecOps, we're still siloed. We still live very much inside of a silo, and there's not a lot of automation. One of the big numbers up here that I find very interesting is that 69% of our survey participants say there's limited use of reporting, metrics, and analytics. So for all the data we're gathering, there's limited use of those metrics. And now from a software perspective, from a software supply chain perspective, we're responsible for the software bill of materials, the SBOM. We have to make sure that we're identifying what's going in there. But we also know cybersecurity is not a whole business issue. 65% say that they do not have a formalized incident response plan. That to me was shocking. And when I present this, people say, well, I think 65% is a low number. I think that it's actually higher. A lot of people say, yeah, there might be a document that says incident response, but a formalized incident response plan where there's actual exercises to see what happens with some sort of outage is very low. Cybersecurity is not included in computing planning. So they're not, when they think about bringing in new systems, when they think about deploying new systems, they're not thinking about cybersecurity. And projects don't have a cybersecurity budget line item. 59% of our survey participants told us that. And 67% say cybersecurity is reactive, not proactive. So cybersecurity is reactive. versus proactive, and it's transactional versus intentional. And so what can you do? Again, go back and talk to your leaders. Take these numbers back. Start the conversation inside of your organization about how you can make cybersecurity part of the business, not just a separate group that lives inside of a silo. Work with the application development team. Understand what's going into the SBOM. Do you have cybersecurity as a line throughout every single project you're working on? And now let's take a look at business agility and how we can align business initiatives with resilient initiatives for better business outcomes. So here's a chart that first glance looks pretty good. Year over year, the gray bars are our 2023 numbers. The blue bars are our 2024 numbers. So keep in mind, we did this survey in March of 2024, so this data is fairly fresh. So if we take a look at these four areas, overall strategy and planning, network, application, and security, we see that between 2023, this is on a per project basis, in 2023, 22% of the project funds were allocated to security. Now in 2024, 33% of the overall project funds are allocated to security. And you say, well, wait a second. You just told me that cybersecurity was underfunded, overlooked, and lived in a silo. But if we look at why they're getting that extra money, it's because of external events. These external events, such as new compliance conditions, will unlock funding for cybersecurity. A breach, whether your own or a competitor, will unlock funding for cybersecurity. I bet you everybody got money to do zero trust and multi-factor authentication after what happened in January. Cyber insurance requirements. Cyber insurance, they may say, you have to be using this type of control, and if you're not, you'll get funding for it. It's not about building out a strategic business. It's about being reactive, again, from a cybersecurity perspective. There could be some sort of supply chain dependency that you have to work on, but remember that incident response plan is not formalized. Only 65% say that they do not have a formalized incident response plan. And these external events are unlocking cybersecurity budgets. But what they also told us is they said, we want to bring in outside help. We know we're having problems. We know we don't have cybersecurity as a through line on every single project that we're out there working on. We know that cybersecurity lives in a silo. We want to make sure that we're breaking those silos apart. We want to bring in external trusted advisors, third-party trusted advisors, all the way through the project, beginning at the beginning with strategy and planning. We want cybersecurity to be included in that. In the architecture, we want to make sure that we're building things with cybersecurity in the architecture from the beginning. Data management and data lifecycle, understanding how you're going to work with your data, whether it is at rest, in transit, or in use. How you're going to make sure that that data is protected, trusted, and usable. And then focusing on things such as endpoint management. Remember, dynamic computing, you're putting a lot of different diverse endpoints out there on your network. Some of them will stay, some of them won't. Now, the ones that don't stay, are you taking them down? They do nothing but increase your attack surface. So understanding what your attack surface looks like from an endpoint point of view. Bringing in things such as quality assurance, application development, bringing in help for that. And 32% say that they strategically delegate responsibility by relying on cybersecurity as a service. So cybersecurity as a service, saying that you're going to bring in on an as-needed basis some external type of help to help you with cybersecurity, so that everything as a service is continuing into cybersecurity. Remove those silos inside of your organization. Take this data back. Talk to your own organization. Talk to your developers. Talk to your network engineers. Talk to your operations team. Get rid of those silos. Having that communication is a big, big first step. Now, what do we think looking ahead? There's a lot of innovation going on. And one of the questions we ask every year is, what type of risk, what type of attack are you most concerned with? Last year in 2023, DDoS was the #1 attack type that people were concerned with. And when we came out with that data, people said, wait a second, DDoS, really? DDoS is one of those things that you look at and you say, that's an old type of attack, and it certainly is. But DDoS was very prevalent in 2023. Now in 2024, so keep in mind, this data was collected in March of 2024. So that is after all of the ransomware attacks we had at the beginning of the year. Ransomware came out by 3 percentage points as the top attack that people were concerned with. Second was business email compromise. And we'll go back to business email compromise in a couple of minutes. But across the board, what people told us is that, yeah, we're concerned about DDoS. You know, DDoS fell here. 40% of people say DDoS is their top attack concern. But they also told us they don't know how to defend against DDoS. So they're concerned about DDoS, but across the board in all 7 industries that we surveyed, they do not know how to defend against DDoS. Now, if you look at business email compromise, and business email compromise came out in the healthcare industry as the #1 attack that people were concerned about, business email compromise. And you think about that in business email compromise saying, I'm going to compromise credentials of somebody probably high enough up in your organization, usually email credentials. So I'm going to be able to extract some money from them. You hear about the gift card scams. You hear about the CEO calling the CFO saying, hey, put $5 million into this overseas bank account right away because we're buying this hot company and we don't want the competitors to find out. That's business email compromise. So think about where business email compromise goes to next. It suddenly starts to be those deep fake videos. And I was at a session a couple of weeks ago, and we did a tabletop exercise where the CEO called the CFO at home late at night through a video call. So the CFO knows the CEO, and there's facial recognition of the CEO. And the CEO said, put $10 million into this account. I'm going to wire you the account because we're about to buy this really hot AI company and we don't want our competitors to find out. The CFO, and they were talking, having a conversation, a normal conversation, and the CEO even referenced personal jokes, personal information that only the CEO would know or only the CFO would know. So the CFO goes into the office the next day and finds out that that was actually a deep fake, that somebody had compromised the credentials of the CFO and compromised the credentials of the CEO, had the CFO put that $10 million into a bank account. So there's a lot of lessons in there. And this exercise was led by the Secret Service. So they're certainly seeing this type of activity going on. So be aware in your organizations that business email compromise is moving beyond just email. So that's the top concern that people have right now is ransomware, followed very closely by business email compromise. And also take a look in your organizations and understand what your remediation practice is against DDoS. Do you know how to remediate against DDoS? What we also asked about was supply chain visibility. And if you think about the supply chain, whether it is the physical supply chain, where you're getting the parts, where you're getting the metal, where you're getting the paper, where you're getting the cotton to build things, where you're getting your parts, the physical supply chain, as well as the software supply chain, have been under attack. The software supply chain we saw at the beginning of the year, there was one tired engineer from Microsoft on a way home, and he noticed some logs didn't look just right, and the XE util could have been corrupted by Jitan, the outside adversary. So that was just a fluke. The engineer was looking at logs, said something doesn't look right. The software supply chain is under attack. That's why your software bill of materials becomes so important. And that's why it's so important that you have cybersecurity as a through line in all of your projects. So if somebody says, we're going to launch this new type of dynamic computing use case, we're going to put robots on our manufacturing floor, you need to make sure that there's a security component to that. How are they securing the application? How are they securing the data? How are they securing the robot? What are they doing to the endpoint? Does the endpoint really map to your network? What does your attack surface now look like because of that? So making sure you have that through line for security. We saw that 59% of our survey participants say they do not have good visibility into their supply chain. And again, this is a great number and it's in our report. It's a great number to take back to your organization and start talking about the visibility of your supply chain, whether it's a physical supply chain or the software supply chain. Do you know where your software is coming from? Do you know the security of that software? Do you know where the parts are coming from that you're building things with within your organization? Do you understand the weakest link in that supply chain? We also found, and this was a surprising one, from a cloud perspective. You know, I think if we listened to all the hype, we would think that everybody in the world was on the cloud. We know here we're on the cloud, witness with what Kyle just had to go through at the start of the meeting. But you would think everything is in the cloud. In fact, 61% of our survey participants say that they are still on premises. However, what they did tell us is that they understand the value, the benefit, and the security rationale of moving to the cloud. So people are moving to the cloud. And then, yeah. You think it's high?
Knowledge, but I don't think that they might have the majority of their stuff on premises, but they still have cloud dependency.
Correct.
And that,
yes.
I think that number's high because if they look at their whole, I'm very much down. 61% have every service on premises.
I agree with you that I doubt that 61% have everything on premise. And I agree with you that there are cloud dependencies. And that's where the problem comes in because they have some stuff in the cloud, some stuff on-prem, and there's a disconnect between that. But they did say they are moving to the cloud. So artificial intelligence, the phrase everybody loves. One of the things we found, and this question was asked, what are you doing with artificial intelligence only as it pertains to cybersecurity? We're not looking at how you're using generative AI in marketing materials. We're not looking at how you might be using machine learning elsewhere. But 61% of the survey participants told us that they are moving slowly to AI from a cybersecurity perspective because they said they want to get things right. I was on a panel last year with Wall Street Journal, and one of my fellow panelists came from a professional sports organization. And he said he's working in the front office of this professional sports team, and everybody's coming to him wanting to know how they're going to use AI. The players, the front office, the owners, the marketing people, the fans, everybody's coming to him wanting to know how he's going to use AI. And he said, you know, look at everything I have to protect. I have all this personal health information of all these players. That can't get out. I have all this personally identifiable information of season ticket holders. I have all of the supply chain that I have to deal with vendors and so on in the stadium selling things. So he said he's taking a very slow and methodical approach to AI. And what we wanted to also find out, because everybody says, you know, if you walk around any of the big trade shows like RSA in San Francisco in May this past year, or Black Hat coming up next week in Las Vegas, you'll see every vendor says, now with AI. Well, is that good or is that bad? We don't know what that means. I take a look at what we've been doing at AT&T Cybersecurity, now Level Blue, in our labs team. We've been using machine learning for the past 10 years. We've been taking that data that we collect, and we've been able to match patterns to it, and we're able to say, here's what's going on. So we've been using machine learning, and I would think most cybersecurity companies, most cybersecurity vendors have been using some amount of machine learning over the past several years. But what we found out from our survey participants was that they said 15% of them are using generative AI. And generative AI can be very powerful. We've talked about business email compromise. And if you think about business email compromise now, those emails, those phishing emails, those deep fakes that your company's going to get, they're far more credible. You're no longer going to get the emails from the prince with the misspelling saying, give me all your bank account information, and by tomorrow you'll have $5 million in your bank account. They look legitimate, they look real. So going back to basic cybersecurity hygiene and saying, here's how we need to train against these types of business email compromise, these types of generative AI types of things that are out there. That's really important. So 15% say that they're generative AI. 35% say they're using artificial intelligence. 26% say they're using machine learning, and 21% say they're using deep learning in the neural network level. And that's great that you guys had a learning session on neural networks. That's really awesome. So this is, how would you guys think about AI? Are you using AI internally, or are you taking it slowly? Taking it slowly? Okay. All right, so that seems to be the consensus. So what can you do to help your organization become more resilient? As I said, take this report, download this report, use it internally to start the discussion. This is part of the problem that we've had as cybersecurity professionals. We've been so isolated and so siloed for a while. And now all of a sudden everybody says cybersecurity is a board level issue. Well, is it? If it really is, then the CISO needs to be reporting into the CEO. They need to be involved in those strategic discussions. Cybersecurity needs to be at the table with every single project that's going on. So identify the barriers in your organization. Do you understand, and does your organization understand the difference between cybersecurity and cyber resilience? Is it a whole business initiative? Is there a plan for your whole business to come together in the event of some type of cyber incident, a man-made incident, or some type of natural disaster? Be secure by design, and especially as you're rolling out new types of dynamic computing. When it's new, it's far easier to be secure by design. Somebody said there's going to be a DevOps meetup, DevOps in cloud. So this kind of goes back to the whole DevSecOps. Is security included with what you're doing with your DevOps? Align cyber investments with the business, and this is probably the most important one. So go back to your organization, look at where your cybersecurity budget is, and then look at the business objectives and the business initiatives that you have. If they're not aligned, how can you align them? Can you get your boss, can you get your CISO to go to the business unit owner, to go to the vice president of that business and say, here's what we need to do to align our cybersecurity objectives with our business initiatives and our business goals? Build out a support ecosystem, bring in those third-party trusted advisors, and then transform your cybersecurity strategy. So those are 5 steps that you can take to really start to be more resilient in your organization. So we invite you to visit us at levelblue.com/futures report. Download the report. I have one copy with me here if anybody would like this. Download the report. It's easy to read. Lots of numbers tell the story. And it's written in a very business-friendly language as well, so that it's not something that, you know, a senior leader might look at and say, oh, there are those cyber guys again, you know, coming to me, asking me for more money when they don't have any proof to back up what they're saying. So this gives you a good start, gives you some good metrics. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for inviting me. Kate, thanks for inviting me to speak at OWASP. Any questions?
Yep, that's all. Thank you, Theresa.
Thank you, Theresa. Thank you.
We got some time. If you all have any questions, you can come off mute, or I didn't see any in chat, but also chat kind of scrolled by on us here. So if anybody has any questions that came up out of chat, feel free to come off mute, or anybody here.
Where I can get the report downloaded.
Yes, you can get the report at levelblue.com/futures report. The URL is right on the slide.
Okay, thank you so much.
And in addition to this report, we call this our core report. This has the 1,050 survey participants. We surveyed 7 different industry verticals. We also have reports for all those 7 different industry verticals. We just launched healthcare a couple of weeks ago. We'll be coming out with retail at the end of August. So all 7 of those verticals that we surveyed, we'll have data for all 7 of those as well.
Yeah, I had a question. You mentioned that like cybersecurity teams are siloed today, which I kind of interpreted as like, well, we have a cybersecurity team, but they're kind of off on their own and they don't interact. Do you have any recommendations of how to break those silos and how to make that cybersecurity organization either more federated or more integrated into other parts of the organization?
Yeah, that's a big problem, isn't it? That we're still very siloed. And if you think about our genesis, we came from the operations team because they just didn't want to have to deal with security. And they're like, yeah, go ahead, do your own thing. And we're doing our own thing in a silo. So take some of this data that talks about why it's important to have cybersecurity be part of the whole project, that why cybersecurity needs to be a through line in every project. Go off and befriend a developer or an operations person or a networking person. I'd say start with a developer. Developers are typically they're typically open to this. And especially with the need now for software bill of materials, I think developers are far more open to talking to security people than they ever were before. I come from an application development background, and probably 20 years ago, when cybersecurity first started becoming a thing, the developers said, wait a second, we're doing really hard work here. You want us to do extra hard work and now take on cybersecurity? And that's when we got this idea of governance. And the governance teams would come through and say, well, yeah, of course the developers did that. But the developers really didn't do that because they're not going to raise their hand for something even more difficult. And the cyber professionals aren't going to say, yeah, we're going to go back and check all that source code. And now we start to see that they do need to be talking together. So I think developers are far more receptive to looking at something like cybersecurity embedded in the source code that they're using, especially with a software bill of materials, especially with DevOps now, and especially with a cloud. It just becomes a little bit easier.
So you mentioned about the healthcare survey, right? So is that I can find in this report?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If you go to levelblue.com/futures report, you'll be able to see we have the healthcare one is the one that's launched right now because that one's finished. So that one's out there as well. And if you can't find it, let me know.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay.
And let's see, Chris Patrick, additional in-depth info on what is cyber resilience. I think some baselines and make sure they can talk to their, besides the report, is there anything other areas that you could?
Yeah, their board, their line of business, people, supply chains that they work with on a regular basis. So, you may be head of purchasing, for example, talking with people in that supply chain line of procurement, for example, to make sure that your suppliers in the supply chain that you're working with are using certain cybersecurity controls, that they have audits, that they do blue team exercises, red team exercises, that they do have a good, clean cyber hygiene practice, because all it takes is one component of that supply chain to fail and you'll have problems.
Hold on.
Thank you, Theresa. That's a very good report. Do you have a report on the cybersecurity industry itself? So
We don't have a report on, you mean like the whole cybersecurity industry? Like, no, we don't have a report on that. I mean, that's a big project to have a report on the whole cybersecurity industry. The cybersecurity industry is big, it's varied, it's fragmented. You have a lot of the legacy types of solutions that we've been using. Now you have a lot of the newer types of solutions. You have the consulting practices, you have the policies, the procedures. So that's a huge, that's something that is probably not feasible. Well, it's not feasible for us with a small team that I have.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm actually more interested in companies, enterprise, they provide cybersecurity tools or services, how these companies manage, security themselves.
Yeah, we have never done any research on how an enterprise manages security. I mean, the biggest thing is what we get back from our survey participants here. And these are the types of questions that we were interested in this year. So, and maybe that's something we ask next year. Maybe that's something that we'd look into. So if you're in an enterprise versus a vendor, if you're in an enterprise, how do you manage your software supply chain? How do you manage your cybersecurity tools? So we did not ask that specific question. Right behind you, Kyle.
See any other questions out there? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Theresa, this is AJ. I'm curious, would you recommend CISOs watch this recording, or have you gotten any feedback from CISOs regarding the similar presentation?
Thank you for that question. That is such a setup. I gave this presentation at RSA, and at RSA was the beginning of May. So this report, we launched it the first day of RSA. And I gave this same session at RSA. And after the event, a CISO came up to me and he said, this was so great. He worked for a large airline. And he said, this was so great. He said, they had this exact same conversation inside of their organization, not 6 weeks prior. And he said, the problem was they had some type of incident. He didn't say what it was. He said they had some type of incident and everybody was looking at him as the CISO to fix the problem. And he said, well, wait a minute, CIO, what are you going to do to help? Line of business, what are you going to do to help? Supply chain, what are you going to do to help? And he said it was at that point, and he reports into the CEO now. He said it was at that point that the CEO realized that just because something might have the word cyber in front of it doesn't mean it applies to the cybersecurity team. He also said that his CEO realized that the CISO, the CIO, and the CTO often don't talk to one another. They have conflicting priorities. They have same goals, but conflicting priorities. And he said at that point, the CEO said, okay, CISO, you now report to me. You're here with the CIO, the CTO, the CEO, the CFO. We're having these big, broader business discussions. So the long answer, or the short answer is, yes, I would have a CISO watch this recording. I would also have a CISO read this report. This report is written in business-friendly language, so a CISO will be able to comprehend so much of what we're saying about aligning cybersecurity goals and business goals, and also making sure that cyber resilience is a whole business problem, not just something for one team.
Yeah. So you might be working with different enterprises, right? Like if I ask you, what are the 1-2 problems enterprises are facing, which we can solve using AI, what would be your answer?
Every enterprise is different. I mean, you can't answer that because it is massive. It might be a different answer for a manufacturing organization versus a retail organization.
Theresa, I'm curious of your personal opinion as you've been following the CRA Act in the EU and what's going to come of that. And maybe part 2, what role does the federal government have in saying everybody wake up and pay attention to this?
Yeah, I think what we saw a couple of weeks ago is the federal government did wake up and say everybody needs to be paying attention to this. You talked about CRA in the UK. That's one of the things we saw. Let me hop back to the first slide. That's one of the things we saw in terms of the barriers that people are concerned about. What we're seeing is that they're saying new regulations require unattainable information. So some of these new regulations coming out, we might not be able to attain the information that is needed to comply with that regulation. So making sure that you have cyber resilience built into your organization is critical, because that says that it is not just the CISO who's responsible for this. It's a whole business priority.
Anybody else? Anybody else online? If not, thank you once again, Theresa, for doing this. It's been great to have you.
Thank you.
And that'll conclude our OWASP July meeting. And hopefully see you all next month in August at the chapter meeting and the happy hour. So see y'all soon. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much.